He began the Saving Stations movement, a grassroots neighborhood ministry that offers alternatives to chemical dependence, violence, and poverty. In 1996 to 2004, Bishop May also served here as the presiding bishop of the Washington Episcopal area. He was the first African-American bishop to hold that role. Bishop May retired in 2004, but retiring is not a word that's actually often associated with Bishop May, as many of you know, and he moved immediately into other activities and moved to take on the role of Dean of the Harry Kendall Science and Health Mission Center at Philander Smith College in Little Rock, Arkansas. Following that, he was asked to step in as interim General Secretary of the General Board of Global Ministries of the United Methodist Church in New York City. And he and Phyllis stayed in New York, where he currently serves as the Executive Director of the Multi-Ethnic Center for Mission and Ministry for the Northeastern Jurisdiction of the United Methodist Church. Bishop May and Phyllis have made more than 40 trips to Africa, visiting 17 African nations. He has been instrumental in initiating ecumenical and United Methodist educational, medical, and developmental programs throughout Africa. He is the convener of the Holistic Strategy Committee on Africa for the Council of Bishops of the United Methodist Church. Bishop May has a passion for economic development in sub-Saharan Africa and the establishment of faith-based initiatives that address the crisis of human deprivation there. He has served as a member of the White House Presidential Commission on Children Orphaned by AIDS in sub-Saharan Africa. He has served as the Vice President of the Board of Directors of Africa University, a Pan-African United Methodist related school in Zimbabwe that serves students from throughout Africa. There are a lot of buildings on a lot of Methodist campuses named after bishops, but I suspect that Bishop May is probably the only one who's actually had an athletic facility named after him. And it's a great honor to have worked with this very prophetic voice in the life of our church. Bishop May, we welcome you here.
Good evening. Good evening. You've been sitting for a while, so why don't you just stand and have a seventh inning stretch. Bishop Matthews, Bishop Scholl, brothers and sisters all, it is indeed an awesome experience to be here in this gathering. Maynard Moore is a magician. He can help you to say yes when you really don't think you ought to say yes. And I commend him for his tenacity, but more especially for his insight and his wisdom. Friends, colleagues, and co-workers. My original slot was, I believe, for tomorrow morning, but the speaker that was scheduled for tonight, being the great politician he is from the 5th City area, could not be here. I think he's busy over at the Congress. But nonetheless, Phyllis and I adjusted our lives so that we might be here with you. Some of you I know very well. Some of you I've only met this evening. But all in all, we're held together in this wonderful family of God by Bishop James Kenneth Matthews and his ministry. I wasn't sure what I was going to say. I have a printed manuscript here, which I will turn over to Maynard Moore, and he can do with it whatever he cares to do with it. and I'll do some cutting and pasting after that wonderful presentation by Bishop Scholl. I hope that you will add in my biographical sketch that I had sufficient wisdom to say yes to the hiring of Bishop Scholl when he became the executive director of Communities of Shalom. Now, a few words adjusted in light of the hour and the issues that have already been shared. I want to begin with Scripture because it has been the very foundation of my life. And I know that the gossip across the church is that I have a slight tinge of evangelical fervor. It doesn't say that in my biographical sketch. Neither did it say that I worked for 5 years at a Reformed Jewish temple on the south side of Chicago. I put my age up 3 years in order to secure the employment that I needed to go to college. And my task was to shepherd the program in the evening in their office. The rabbi was a most brilliant professor at the University of Chicago. He was Rabbi Louis Leopold Mann. He began the wonderful program of Christians and Jews in Chicago. He was so reformed that the people in the community called the temple Saint Sinai on the lake. And that was why he held his worship services on Sunday morning at 11 and used his own version of the prayer leaflets for that particular Sunday. And 5 of his sermons out of the year was on the life, the mission, and ministry of Jesus Christ. It was a 1,600-member congregation, and the auditorium held 2,000. And when he would do his 5 Sundays on the mission and ministry of Jesus Christ, there was not an empty seat in the synagogue. One day when he was exiting, he said to me, "I think one day you will be doing the same." I said, "What?" He said, "I think God has called you to be a minister." He said, "Will you go into the Hyde Park community and work at St. James Methodist Church?" St. James Methodist Church became the first integrated Methodist church in the Rock River Annual Conference. He said they intend to start a church school on Sunday afternoon, and you could become a teacher. I said, "I don't know anything about that." He said, "Doesn't your denomination have a bookstore?" I said, "Yes." He said, "What is its name?" I said, "Cokesbury." He said, "I think tomorrow you should go downtown and find the books in Cokesbury for dealing with junior highs at this congregation." And I said, "Yes, Dr. Mann." And I did that. And that was the beginning of appropriating his global view for mission and ministry into my own understanding of what it meant to be a child of God. It has been a wonderful experience. And so I cannot help but offer a word of scripture to place a few words that I'm going to share in context. The scripture comes from Luke 19:14. And when he drew near and saw the city, he wept. He wept over it, saying, "Would that even today you knew the things that made for peace." He was looking down upon Jerusalem, the city of peace. The verse caught my eye, and then my ear, and then my heart when I heard the words, he wept. My mind immediately went to the story in John 11, relating to Mary and Martha and Lazarus. In this passage, Luke 19:14 and following, I focused on the city. I'm a city person. Born in Chicago, spent summers in Detroit, Michigan, lived in Wilmington, Delaware, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Little Rock, Arkansas, Washington, D.C., and now New York City. Jesus wept. And I, in the past recent months, weep for the city. Those non-gentrified sections that were healthy and vibrant cities. I wept when my family shared about Chicago. Youth with baseball bats and murder in their eyes. When I read reports about Detroit, the motor capital of the world, just a shell of a city where I spent most of my summers at the Bowler Printing and Publishing Company, owned and managed by my uncle and aunt. Most recently, I've spent time with Bishop Dalvadar and his staff. He is the bishop of the Greater New Jersey Annual Conference. Oh, what a hellhole Newark, New Jersey really is. Drugs, prostitution, in the brightness of daylight on the streets, not just in the so-called neighborhoods, but along the main thoroughfares of that once vibrant city. I wept as we drove in a van with Bishop Devadar, his district superintendent, and his conference staff, so that I could see the 5 churches that remain in Newark, New Jersey, when only 23 years ago there had been 20 United Methodist churches. Newark, New Jersey is a mess. That's an acronym some of you know as misery and evil side by side. People will live They will exist by any means necessary. Selling their bodies or taking from one another in such proportion that the two largest, most well-built institutions in the community are funeral homes, where 3 and 4 funerals take place day by day. And in its population, African American and Hispanic, 80% of those who live there live in non-traditional families. They will develop an alternative means of employment for survival. Businesses have moved out. Goods once made in local factories have long since moved overseas. There are no tenors singing in Newark.